My name is Evelyn, and I'm 34 years old. For years, my husband made me feel invisible in my own home, while his mother never missed a chance to remind me that I wasn't good enough for their family. They saw me as someone easy to control, someone who would never fight back. But the night I overheard what my husband really thought of me, something inside me shifted. What happened next would shake their world in ways they never saw coming. The empty house, the frozen accounts, and the note I left behind were just the beginning. Before we dive into what happened, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your location in the comments below, hit that like button, and subscribe for more stories about standing up when everyone expects you to stay down. I woke up at 6 that morning, just like I always did. The sunlight was soft through our bedroom curtains, and for a moment, everything felt normal. I slipped out of bed quietly, careful not to wake Liam, and padded downstairs to the kitchen. My bare feet were cold against the hardwood floors, but I didn't mind. This was my routine, my way of showing love even when I wasn't sure if it was being received anymore. Making breakfast for him had become my ritual over the years. I whisked eggs until they were perfectly fluffy, toasted bread to that exact shade of golden brown he preferred, and arranged fresh flowers in a small vase on the table. The routine gave me comfort, even when I felt like our marriage was drifting somewhere I couldn't quite name. I hummed softly as I worked, telling myself that love was about these small gestures, about showing up every day even when things felt hard. The kitchen smelled like coffee and butter, and I tried to focus on that warmth instead of the coldness that had settled between us. When Liam finally came downstairs, he barely looked at me. His eyes went straight to his phone, his thumb scrolling rapidly through messages. His hair was still messy from sleep, and he wore the expensive silk pajamas I'd bought him for his birthday. I set his plate down in front of him with a smile, hoping for at least a thank you or a good morning. "Good morning," I said gently, pouring him a cup of coffee just the way he liked it. Black, no sugar. He glanced at the eggs and frowned, his face twisting with disgust. "This looks too oily, Evelyn. How many times do I have to tell you I don't like greasy food?" My chest tightened, but I forced myself to stay calm. I looked down at the plate, trying to see what he saw, but the eggs looked perfectly fine to me.
"I'm sorry."
"I'll make it differently next time."
He didn't respond.
Just kept eating while staring at his screen, occasionally shaking his head at whatever he was reading. I sat across from him with my own plate, suddenly feeling self-conscious about every bite I took. The silence between us felt heavy, suffocating. I could hear the clock ticking on the wall, each second stretching out uncomfortably. I wanted to ask him about his day, about his work, about anything that might bridge the gap between us, but the words wouldn't come. I was too afraid of being dismissed again. Later that morning, the doorbell rang. I opened it to find Margaret, Liam's mother, standing there with her designer purse and her perfectly painted smile. She wore a cream-colored suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent, and her hair was styled in that stiff, salon-perfect way. She didn't wait for an invitation. She just walked right in, her heels clicking sharply against the floor. "Evelyn, dear," she said, her eyes traveling down my body in that way she always did. Her gaze lingered on my hips, my thighs, my stomach. "Still indulging, I see." I felt my face grow hot. I was wearing comfortable clothes, nothing fancy, just leggings and an oversized sweater. Suddenly, I felt exposed, like she could see every imperfection, every pound I'd gained since the wedding. I wanted to tell her that my body was none of her business, but the words stuck in my throat. I'd never been good at confrontation, especially not with her. "Would you like some coffee?" I asked instead, my voice barely above a whisper. She waved her hand dismissively and walked toward the living room where Liam was now sitting. I followed, feeling like a guest in my own home, like I was intruding on something private. Margaret settled onto the couch like she owned it, crossing her legs elegantly. Margaret pulled Liam aside after a few minutes, but she didn't bother lowering her voice. I stood in the doorway, frozen, as I heard her say, "You could have married a model, Liam. Instead, you ended up with this." My stomach dropped. The air left my lungs. I pretended I hadn't heard, turning quickly back to the kitchen. My hands trembled as I gripped the counter, my knuckles turning white. I told myself it didn't matter what she thought.
But it did. God, it did.
Because she was saying out loud what I'd feared Liam had been thinking all along. At lunch, I couldn't help myself. The comment had been eating at me all morning, gnawing at my confidence. I looked at Liam across the table and asked quietly, "Have I gained weight?" He looked up from his phone, his expression cold and annoyed, like I'd interrupted something important. "You're asking now?" The cruelty in his tone cut through me like a knife. It wasn't just what he said, but how he said it. Like I was stupid for not already knowing the answer. Like I was pathetic for even asking. I looked down at my plate and said nothing else. I realized then that I wasn't his partner anymore. I was his target. Every comment, every look, every silence was designed to make me smaller. That afternoon, my phone rang. It was Jonah Reed, my late father's attorney, and one of the few people who still treated me with genuine kindness. His voice was warm and steady, like a lifeline thrown to someone drowning. "Evelyn, I wanted to check in about renewing your father's trust documents. Do you have time this week to meet?" "Yes," I said, grateful for his calm presence. "That would be good." We chatted briefly about schedules and paperwork, but underneath the professional conversation, I sensed his concern. Jonah had known me since I was a child. He'd been at my father's side for years, and he'd watched me grow up. When I hung up, I felt a strange contrast. Jonah spoke to me like I mattered, like my thoughts and feelings were important. Liam spoke to me like I was a burden, an inconvenience he had to tolerate. Later that evening, I heard Liam on the phone in his office. His voice was tense, almost panicked. The door was slightly ajar, and I stood in the hallway, straining to hear. I couldn't make out all the words, but I heard enough. Something about payments. Something about debt. Something about running out of time. He was hiding something from me, and that realization made my chest ache. We were married. We were supposed to be a team. Why was he keeping secrets? The next day, while doing laundry, I found a receipt in Liam's pants pocket. It was from an expensive restaurant downtown, the kind of place you took someone when you wanted to impress them. The date jumped out at me immediately. It was from last Tuesday, a night when he'd told me he was working late at the office, that he'd grabbed a sandwich at his desk. But the receipt showed 2 entrees, 2 glasses of wine, and a dessert to share. The total was over $200. My hands shook as I stared at it. I wanted to march upstairs and demand answers, to throw the receipt in his face and ask him who he'd been with. But something stopped me. Maybe it was fear. Maybe it was the knowledge that confrontation would only lead to more cruelty, more gaslighting. Instead, I folded the receipt carefully and tucked it into my drawer, next to my journal. Evidence. Just in case. That evening, I tried to ask him gently. I didn't want to accuse him directly. I still had hope that maybe there was a reasonable explanation. "Did you go out recently?" I thought I saw a receipt. His head snapped toward me, his eyes sharp and angry. "Stop snooping, Evelyn. You're paranoid." The defensiveness in his voice terrified me more than anything else. If he had nothing to hide, why was he so angry? Why couldn't he just explain? I backed down immediately, apologizing even though I'd done nothing wrong.
"I'm sorry."
I didn't mean to pry. He went back to his phone, dismissing me completely. I sat there feeling small and stupid, wondering how I'd become this person. The woman who apologized for asking honest questions. The woman who walked on eggshells in her own home. That night, I pulled out my journal and wrote, "I think he's slipping away." Or, "Maybe I'm finally seeing him clearly." The words stared back at me, and I realized they were both true. He was pulling away from me, but at the same time, the fog was lifting. I was starting to see our marriage for what it really was. The next evening, I decided to try again. Maybe if I made his favorite meal, if I set the table beautifully, if I showed him how much I still cared, things could get better. It was foolish thinking, I know that now, but back then I still believed that love could fix everything. I spent the entire afternoon cooking from scratch, preparing every dish exactly the way he liked. His favorite pasta with homemade sauce. Garlic bread. A salad with that specific dressing he preferred. I even opened a bottle of expensive wine. I set candles on the table, dimming the lights to create a romantic atmosphere. I wore a dress I knew he used to love, a deep blue one that used to make him smile. I put on makeup, styled my hair, even spritzed on perfume. I told myself this was going to be a turning point. We'd have a nice dinner, we'd talk, and maybe we'd remember why we fell in love in the first place. Then his phone buzzed on the counter. I glanced at it without thinking, just a casual look. The contact name said A Plumbing, which seemed odd, but the message preview made my blood run cold. I missed last night already. I froze. My heart hammered in my chest, so hard I thought it might break through my ribs. I stood there staring at that screen, feeling like the floor was crumbling beneath me. A plumber doesn't send messages like that. Nobody does, except someone you're intimate with. Someone you're hiding. I didn't confront him. I couldn't. My voice had disappeared, trapped somewhere in my throat along with all the questions I wanted to ask. Instead, I wiped my hands on a towel and walked outside into the backyard, gulping down air like I'd been drowning. The evening air was cool, but I barely felt it. I pressed my palms against my thighs, trying to steady myself, trying to stop the shaking that had taken over my entire body. When I finally went back inside, Margaret was there again. She must have let herself in with the spare key Liam gave her, the one I'd asked him not to give her. She looked at me with disdain and immediately started in on me, not even bothering with pleasantries this time. "Evelyn, that dress does nothing for you. And your hair, my God. When was the last time you saw a stylist? You look like you've given up." Liam said nothing. He didn't defend me. He didn't tell his mother to stop. He didn't even look uncomfortable. He just stood there, scrolling through his phone like I wasn't even in the room, like his mother wasn't verbally tearing me apart right in front of him. That silence hurt more than Margaret's words. It told me everything I needed to know about where I stood in his life. I excused myself to the bathroom, needing to escape before I started crying. I walked down the hallway on shaky legs, but as I approached the bathroom door, I heard voices. Low, harsh whispers coming from the kitchen. I stopped just outside the doorway, hidden from view, my heart pounding. Liam's voice was venomous, dripping with disgust. Sleeping with that whale makes me sick. I gag looking at her. She's only good for her money. The world stopped. Time froze. My breath caught in my throat. I felt like someone had reached into my chest and crushed my heart with their bare hands, squeezing until there was nothing left. Those words echoed in my head, over and over, each repetition cutting deeper than the last.
Wail. Sick. Gag.
Money. Margaret's voice followed, smug and satisfied. Once you get her assets, you can disappear. She'll be too broken to fight you. Women like her never fight back. They just cry and eat their feelings. I stood there, frozen, unable to move. Tears didn't come. My body just shut down, going into some kind of shock. I absorbed every word like poison seeping into my veins, spreading through my system, contaminating everything. They were plotting, planning my destruction like it was a business transaction. Like I was nothing but an obstacle to be removed. After what felt like hours but was probably only seconds, I forced myself to walk back into the kitchen. My hands were trembling, but I picked up my teacup and stirred it calmly, mechanically. Liam and Margaret looked at me, and I smiled. It was the most dangerous smile I'd ever worn. The smile of a woman who had nothing left to lose. "Dinner's ready," I said softly, my voice surprisingly steady. Liam nodded, oblivious. Margaret smirked, probably thinking she'd broken me. They had no idea what I'd just heard. They had no idea what they'd just unleashed. They thought I was weak, that I'd crumble under the weight of their cruelty. They were about to learn how wrong they were. That night, I lay in bed next to Liam, staring at the ceiling. He was snoring lightly, completely at peace, probably dreaming about his mistress or about how he'd spend my father's money once he got rid of me. Meanwhile, my entire world had shattered. The marriage I'd believed in, the love I'd fought for, the future I'd imagined. All of it was gone. It had never really existed at all. But I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't fall apart the way they expected me to. Instead, I made a decision. I would never cry in front of him again. I would never let him see me break. I would never give him the satisfaction of knowing how deeply he'd hurt me. Because I was done being his victim. I was done being the fat, stupid woman he could mock and manipulate and use. Something had shifted inside me. Something fundamental. The woman who'd woken up that morning was gone. In her place was someone new, someone harder, someone who would not go quietly into the night while he took everything my father had worked for. The next morning, I called Jonah before Liam woke up. My voice was steady when I asked if I could meet him at his office. He agreed immediately, concern clear in his voice even through the phone. When I arrived at his downtown office building, he greeted me warmly and led me into his private conference room. The room was all dark wood and leather chairs, the kind of place where serious business got handled. I told him everything. Every cruel word. Every suspicious receipt. Every late night. Every lie. I told him about the text message, about what I'd overheard, about Margaret's plotting. Jonah's face darkened with anger as he listened, his jaw clenching tighter with each detail I shared. "Evelyn," he said quietly when I finished, leaning forward in his chair, "I need to tell you something. A few weeks ago, Liam contacted me. He was trying to gain access to your father's remaining assets. He wanted me to help him transfer certain properties into his name. He claimed it was for tax purposes, that you discussed it. I blocked it, of course, but I should have told you sooner." My stomach turned. It was worse than I thought. Much worse. Liam hadn't just fallen out of love with me. He'd been planning to destroy me financially, to take everything and leave me with nothing. This wasn't a marriage ending. This was a calculated robbery. For the first time since I'd overheard that conversation, I cried. Not soft tears, but deep, wrenching sobs that came from somewhere I couldn't control. My whole body shook with the force of it. Years of trying to be good enough, of trying to earn his love, of blaming myself for his coldness. All of it came pouring out. Jonah handed me tissues and sat quietly, letting me break down without judgment, without trying to fix it or minimize it. "You're not weak," he said gently when my sobs finally quieted. "You're human, and you're allowed to feel this." Over the next few days, Jonah helped me audit every single account Liam and I shared. We went through years of bank statements, credit card bills, investment records. What we found made my blood run cold. He'd been siphoning money for months, maybe longer. Small amounts at first, then larger ones. He'd used my name to open accounts I didn't even know existed. He'd taken out credit cards in my name and maxed them out. He'd forged my signature on documents. The evidence of his betrayal was everywhere once we started looking. "We can fix this," Jonah said, his voice firm and determined. "But you need to act fast. He's going to notice that you're onto him eventually." I nodded, my fear transforming into something sharper. Something like rage. I was done being passive. I was done being the nice girl who never made waves. I froze all the joint accounts that same day. I rerouted my inheritance and property into a new trust that Liam couldn't touch, one that was ironclad and protected. Every move was calculated, quiet, and deliberate. I was taking back control of my life, piece by piece. At home, I watched Liam carefully. I saw the mask now, the performance he put on. The fake smiles when he needed something. The practiced charm when he wanted to manipulate me. I saw the monster he'd always been, hidden beneath a handsome face and smooth words. How had I missed it for so long? Or had I just been too afraid to see it? One evening, I called my best friend Hannah. We'd known each other since elementary school, and she was one of the few people in my life who'd never judged me, never made me feel less than. I told her everything, the words tumbling out in a rush, and she listened without interrupting. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "The opposite of love isn't hate, Evelyn. It's clarity. And it sounds like you're finally seeing clearly." Her words hit me like a lightning bolt. She was right. I didn't hate Liam. Hate required caring, required emotional investment. I just finally saw him clearly. I saw him for exactly what he was, without the filter of hope or love or denial. And what I saw was a predator who'd chosen me because he thought I'd be easy prey. I started quietly moving my belongings. Childhood photos went first, then my father's letters, then my grandmother's ring. I rented a storage unit across town and filled it with everything that mattered to me. Every item that had sentimental value, everything I'd want to keep safe. Liam never noticed. He was too busy texting his mistress and scheming with his mother. Too busy counting money that wasn't his yet. One night, I stood in front of the bathroom mirror and stared at my reflection. My face looked different somehow. Older maybe, but also stronger. My father's voice echoed in my mind, something he'd told me years ago when I was being bullied in school. Evelyn, people will underestimate you because of how you look.
Let them.
Then show them who you really are. I whispered to myself, he despises me because he can't control me anymore. The truth of that statement settled over me like armor. Liam's cruelty wasn't about my weight or my appearance. It was about power. He'd lost his power over me the moment I started seeing clearly, and he could sense it. That night, I lay in bed next to Liam one last time. I stared at the ceiling, my heart pounding with anticipation rather than fear. My mind ran through the plan Jonah, and I had finalized that afternoon. Every detail was in place. Every document was signed. Every account was protected. I whispered a single word into the darkness, so quietly that even if Liam had been awake, he wouldn't have heard it. Tomorrow. I met the realtor at dawn, when the city was still quiet and the streets were empty. Her name was Patricia, and Jonah had recommended her as someone discreet and efficient. The house, worth $2.4 million, could be sold quickly if I was willing to accept a private offer from a cash buyer. I signed the paperwork without hesitation, my hand steady as I wrote my name. This house held nothing but painful memories now. Let someone else fill it with happiness. Next, I went to the bank. I'd made an appointment with the branch manager, and we met in his private office. I cleared every personal account, moving funds into the trust Jonah had set up. I transferred everything, down to the last penny. I shut down all shared credit cards, all joint accounts, everything that connected me financially to Liam. His access to my money vanished in a matter of hours. Years of careful planning on his part, destroyed in a single morning. Back at the house, I packed only what I needed. My documents were already secured in waterproof folders. My father's watch, the one he'd worn every day of his adult life, went into my purse. A few changes of clothes, practical things, nothing fancy. I left behind every gift Liam had ever given me. The jewelry, the designer handbags, the expensive perfumes. I didn't want a single reminder of him. I didn't want anything purchased with lies. Then I sat down at the kitchen table, the same table where I'd served him breakfast just days ago, and wrote a note. I kept it simple.
Direct.
Final. You will never hurt me again. Goodbye, Liam. I called the movers Jonah had arranged. They arrived in an unmarked truck, professional and quick. Within hours, the house was empty. Furniture, dishes, everything. All of it disappeared into trucks and storage. Some would be sold, some donated, some kept. It didn't matter. What mattered was that Liam would come home to nothing. The walls echoed with emptiness, and I found a strange satisfaction in that sound. I stood in the doorway one last time, looking at the home I'd once filled with hope. The woman who'd walked through that door years ago, full of love and trust and naive optimism, was gone. In her place stood someone stronger. Someone who refused to be destroyed. Someone who understood that survival sometimes meant burning everything down and starting over. Hannah pulled up in her car, right on schedule. I climbed in without looking back, without a single moment of hesitation. "You okay?" she asked, searching my face. "I will be," I said, and I meant it. She drove me several towns away to a small lakeside cabin I'd rented under my new trust. It was quiet, peaceful, safe. The kind of place where you could breathe again, where you could remember who you were before someone tried to break you. Meanwhile, Liam returned home to find nothing.
No furniture.
No money. No wife. Just an empty house and a short, devastating note on the kitchen counter. I imagine his panic, his rage, his disbelief. I imagine him calling my phone over and over, getting sent straight to voicemail. I imagined him checking the bank accounts and seeing zeros across every screen. For years, he'd underestimated me. He thought I was too weak, too broken, too desperate for love to ever fight back. He thought I'd take whatever cruelty he dished out because I had no other options, because no one else would want me. He was wrong about all of it. Later that evening, Margaret must have stormed in, screaming that I'd stolen everything. I pictured her face, red with fury, as she realized her plan had fallen apart. I pictured Liam's face draining of color as he realized the truth. He had nothing left. No money, no house, no victim to manipulate. Just debt and lies and the bitter taste of his own medicine. At the cabin, I stepped outside onto the porch. The air was crisp and clean, carrying the scent of pine trees and lake water. The lake stretched out before me, calm and endless, reflecting the sunset in shades of pink and gold. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath, filling my lungs with freedom. For the first time in years, I whispered the words I'd been too afraid to say, too beaten down to believe. I'm free. And I was. Finally, completely, utterly free. The first night in the cabin, I slept better than I had in months.
No tensión.
No walking on eggshells. No wondering what cruel comment would greet me in the morning. Just silence and peace and the gentle sound of water lapping against the shore outside my window. But I knew Liam wouldn't accept this quietly. Men like him never did. I imagined him that morning, storming through the empty house. I could picture him so clearly, flipping open drawers, yanking open closets, shouting my name as if I was hiding in some corner, playing a game. The echo of his voice would make the emptiness even louder, would drive home the reality that I was truly gone. Hannah called me around noon. He's been calling everyone, she said. He called me 6 times already. He's frantic. What did you tell him? That I have no idea where you are. Which is technically true since you didn't tell me the exact address. She paused. Evelyn, he sounds desperate. Almost scared. Good, I said, and I meant it. For once, he could feel what I'd felt. The fear. The uncertainty. The loss of control. According to Hannah, Liam had opened his banking app around 10 that morning. She heard through a mutual friend that he'd literally dropped his phone when he saw the zeros across every account. His face had gone white, then red, then white again. He tried calling the bank immediately, hands shaking so badly he could barely dial. The bank manager had been professional but clear. Mrs. Hart transferred ownership yesterday. Everything is in order. There's nothing we can do for you, Mr. Foster. I wish I could have seen his face in that moment. The moment he realized I'd outsmarted him. Margaret had shown up around 11, according to the neighbor who later told Hannah everything. She'd barged through the front door, her heels clicking on the bare floors, and started shrieking the moment she saw the empty rooms. This is what happens when you marry a barn animal, she'd screamed at Liam. I told you she was nothing but trouble. She's stolen everything. But for once, Liam had screamed back. She didn't steal anything. It was her money. Her house. Everything was hers. The realization must have hit him then. He'd never actually owned anything. He'd been living in my house, spending my money, plotting to take my inheritance. And now it was all gone, and he had nothing. Not even his dignity. That afternoon, Liam called Jonah. I knew he would eventually. He was arrogant enough to think that Jonah would help him, that somehow he could manipulate my father's old friend the way he'd tried to manipulate me. Jonah called me right after. He just left my office, Jonah said, amusement in his voice. He demanded I tell him where you are and help him fix this situation. Those were his exact words. What did you say? I told him that Evelyn Hart is far smarter than he ever realized and that she gave me explicit instructions not to help him under any circumstances. Then I told him to leave before I called security. I smiled. Liam had always underestimated the people around me, assuming they'd be as easy to manipulate as he thought I was.
He was learning otherwise now.
By evening, Liam had apparently ripped out the home's Wi-Fi router in a fit of rage, throwing it against the wall. He'd found something else too, according to what Hannah pieced together. The storage unit key. I'd left it deliberately, tucked in a drawer in the kitchen. I wanted him to find it. I wanted him to think there might be something valuable there, something he could still claim. The next morning, he rushed to the storage facility. I imagined him fumbling with a key, his hands shaking with anticipation, probably already planning what he'd sell first. The unit door rolled up, and inside, he found exactly what I'd left for him. Old photo albums. Journals from my teenage years. Sentimental items that had no monetary value whatsoever. My grandmother's recipe book. My father's favorite coffee mug. Love letters my parents had written to each other.
No documents.
No bank statements. No cash. No title deeds. Just memories he'd never cared about. He must have stood there, staring at those boxes, finally understanding that he'd never known me at all. He'd seen what he wanted to see, a lonely, insecure woman he could use. He'd never bothered to look deeper, to see the strength my father had instilled in me, the intelligence I'd inherited from my mother, the quiet determination that had been there all along. Margaret, still refusing to admit defeat, had an idea. She'll run to that pathetic friend of hers, that Hannah woman, she told Liam. We'll go there and make her tell us where Evelyn is. They drove to Hannah's home that evening, pounding on the door like debt collectors. Hannah told me she watched them through the peephole first, seeing Liam's disheveled appearance, Margaret's twisted expression. Then she opened the door calmly, crossing her arms. Where is she? Liam demanded. Hannah smiled. She's gone somewhere you'll never get to. This is kidnapping. I'm calling the police. Margaret shrieked. Go ahead, Hannah said. Tell them you're looking for a grown woman who left her cheating husband. I'm sure they'll be very sympathetic. They tried threatening. They tried pleading. Liam's tone shifted from arrogant to frightened as he realized that Evelyn truly wasn't coming back. He tried calling me nonstop, leaving voicemail after voicemail. At the cabin, I listened to them once. Just once. His voice cycled through every manipulation tactic he knew. First came anger. How dare you do this to me? You're insane. Then bargaining. We can work this out, Evelyn. I know I made mistakes. Then gaslighting. You're remembering things wrong. I never said those things. Finally, desperation. Please, Evie. I love you. I need you. Come home. I listened to that last message twice, searching for any genuine emotion in his voice. There was none. Just calculation. Just another performance from a man who'd been acting our entire marriage. I deleted them all. My hand no longer trembled. My heart no longer ached. I felt nothing but relief. But Liam wasn't done. He had one final, desperate idea. Someone I hadn't spoken to in years, someone from my past that he thought he could use. Claire Whitford. The wealthy widow. The woman he'd been secretly seeing. The woman who was about to teach him that he wasn't as clever as he thought. Liam met Claire at a rooftop bar downtown, the kind of place with overpriced cocktails and a view of the city skyline. She was already there when he arrived, sitting at a corner table, looking beautiful and cold in a black dress. I know all of this because Claire called me the next day and told me everything. But I'm getting ahead of myself. You disappeared on me, Claire said when Liam sat down, her voice sharp. You ruined my life by vanishing yesterday. I've been calling you nonstop. I've been dealing with a crisis, Liam said, running his hand through his hair. My wife, she went insane. She emptied our accounts and disappeared. But I'm going to get everything back. I just need a little time. Claire studied him, her expression unreadable. And how exactly do you plan to do that? I'll find her. I'll make her see reason. She's emotional right now, but she'll come around. She always does. He reached for Claire's hand across the table. We can still have our future together, once I get the money sorted out. That's when Claire pulled her hand away. Liam, I need to tell you something. I was never actually in love with you. He blinked. What? You reminded me of my ex-husband. Charming, handsome, completely selfish. I wanted attention, and you gave it to me. But I didn't want a real relationship. I just wanted to feel desired again. Liam's face twisted with confusion and anger. So this was all a game to you? Wasn't it a game to you too? Claire asked. Or Were you genuinely planning to leave your wife for me? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you were planning to take her money and then decide whether I was worth keeping around. He had no answer for that, because she was right. Meanwhile, back at the cabin, I was opening an old locked box that Hannah had retrieved from the storage unit. It was small, wooden, with my initials carved into the lid. My father had given it to me on my 18th birthday, but I'd forgotten about it over the years. Inside, beneath some old jewelry and photographs, I found a letter. The paper was yellowed, the handwriting unmistakably my father's. The date at the top made my heart skip. 5 years ago, just a few months before he died. My dearest Evelyn, it began. If you're reading this, then I'm gone, and something has gone wrong in your life. Tears blurred my vision as I read his words. He'd known. Somehow, he'd known that I might end up in a situation like this. I've watched you grow into a beautiful, intelligent, kind woman. But I've also watched how people treat you because of your size, how they underestimate you, how they assume you're easy to control. If someone ever marries you for your wealth rather than your heart, there will be signs. Don't ignore them. Don't convince yourself that love can fix what's fundamentally broken. His words felt like he was speaking directly to me from beyond the grave, like he'd foreseen exactly what would happen with Liam. I've created a hidden trust in case you ever need to disappear, to start over. Jonah knows about it. It's worth far more than you realize. Use it to build a new life. Use it to become who you're meant to be, free from anyone who would try to diminish you. I broke down completely. For the first time since leaving, I cried, not out of pain, but out of love for my father. He'd protected me even after death. He'd given me the tools I needed to save myself. I pressed the letter to my chest and sobbed, grieving him all over again but also feeling grateful beyond words. A knock at the cabin door startled me. I wiped my eyes and looked through the window. It was Jonah. I let him in, still holding the letter. He saw it immediately and nodded. So you found it. You knew about this letter? Your father made me promise not to tell you about it unless you absolutely needed it. He said if you were happy, truly happy, you'd never need to find it. But if something went wrong... He trailed off. Jonah sat down and pulled out a folder. The trust your father set up is worth $3.7 million. It's been accruing interest for years. It's completely separate from everything else, completely protected. He created it specifically so that if someone ever tried to trap you financially, you'd have a way out. I stared at the numbers on the paper. My father had given me more than an escape route. He'd given me freedom, security, and the power to rebuild my life on my own terms. Evelyn, Jonah said gently, you're not running anymore. You're rebuilding. And you're going to be just fine.
I stood taller that day.
The grief transformed into strength. I wasn't the broken woman Liam thought I was. I wasn't the weak victim Margaret had dismissed. I was my father's daughter, and I was finally becoming who I was meant to be. Back in the city, Liam's world continued to crumble. Debt collectors started calling nonstop. His credit cards were frozen. His car got flagged for repossession because he'd been making payments from our joint account, which no longer existed. And then Claire called me. I didn't recognize the number at first, but I answered anyway. Evelyn? This is Claire Whitford. I need to talk to you. My stomach tightened. How did you get this number? From Liam's phone. Please, just hear me out. She took a deep breath. I've been seeing your husband.
I'm sure you know that.
I'm calling to tell you it's over, and also to apologize. I was quiet, waiting. I expected you to scream at me, to cry, to be devastated. But Liam showed me your text messages with him. You're not devastated at all, are you? You're done with him. Yes, I said simply. I am.
Good, she said.
Because he's a parasite. I didn't realize it until he showed up yesterday, desperate, trying to manipulate me into helping him find you. I'm sorry for my part in this. I didn't know he was stealing from you, that he was planning to ruin you financially. Thank you for telling me, I said. And then, surprising myself, I added, you've actually helped me more than you know. If he hadn't been so distracted by his affair, he might have noticed me planning my escape. Claire laughed, a bitter sound. I guess we both underestimated you. Everyone did, I said. I'm used to it. When we hung up, I realized something profound. Claire had expected competition, expected drama, expected me to fight for a man who wasn't worth fighting for. Instead, she'd found herself facing something she didn't understand. A woman who'd found clarity. She hadn't been competing with me. She'd been competing with my late father's intelligence, with the protection he'd built around me, with the strength he'd always known I had. And she was losing. After 2 weeks at the cabin, I quietly returned to the city. Not to hide, not to run, but to take the next step. Jonah had set me up in a beautiful condo owned by my trust, a place Liam didn't know existed. It had floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the river, and for the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe. We need to talk about the next move, Jonah said when we met at his office the following day. He spread documents across his conference table. Liam opened credit cards in your name. He forged your signature on multiple documents. What he did wasn't just cruel, Evelyn. It was illegal. You think I should press charges? I think you have 2 options. Press criminal charges immediately, which could send him to jail. Or file a civil lawsuit that will expose everything publicly and force him to pay damages. He leaned forward. The lawsuit is more powerful, in my opinion. It's not just about punishment. It's about justice. It's about making sure everyone knows what he did. I thought about it for a long moment. The old Evelyn would have been too embarrassed to make things public, too worried about what people would think. But the new Evelyn understood that shame only had power if I gave it power. File the lawsuit, I said. All of it. Identity theft, financial fraud, emotional cruelty, spousal manipulation. I want everything documented and public. Jonah smiled. That's what I was hoping you'd say. The lawsuit was filed 3 days later. The documents were thick, detailed, damning. Every credit card he'd opened, every forged signature, every dollar he'd stolen, every cruel comment that Hannah had witnessed, every lie he'd told.
It was all there in black and white.
Liam received the court summons while he was at Margaret's house, sleeping on her couch because he had nowhere else to go. According to Margaret's neighbor, who happened to be friends with Hannah, his face drained of all color when he read the papers. How dare she? Margaret screamed, her voice carrying through the whole house. After everything you've done for her. After you married her when no one else would have her. But Liam just collapsed onto the couch, the papers falling from his hands. She was never supposed to fight back, he whispered. Women like her don't fight back. They just take it. They just accept it. That's what he believed. That my low self-esteem, my desperation to be loved, my years of conditioning would keep me trapped forever. He'd built his entire plan on my weakness, never imagining I might find strength. Meanwhile, I was discovering myself again. I got my hair done, not because I was trying to impress anyone, but because I wanted to feel good for myself. I bought new clothes that fit my body and made me feel confident. I started going to the gym, not to lose weight, but to feel strong and capable. My self-worth was growing like wildfire, fed by every day of freedom, every night of peaceful sleep, every moment of living life on my own terms. Hannah came over one evening with wine and takeout. We sat on my new balcony, watching the city lights twinkle below us. You know what this is? She asked. This isn't revenge. This is justice. What's the difference? Revenge is about hurting someone because they hurt you. Justice is about making sure they face consequences for their actions and can't hurt anyone else. She raised her glass. You're not destroying him because you hate him. You're holding him accountable because it's the right thing to do. I clinked my glass against hers. She was right. I didn't hate Liam. I pitied him. He'd thrown away a real relationship for money he'd never actually get. He destroyed something genuine for something fake. And now he had nothing at all. A week before the court hearing, Liam tried one last trick. He showed up at my condo building, trying to charm the concierge into letting him up. He'd shaved, put on a nice suit, and practiced his most sincere smile. I'm her husband, he told the concierge. I just need to talk to her. There's been a terrible misunderstanding. The concierge, a middle-aged woman named Rosa, who I'd already told about my situation, looked at him with cold eyes. Mrs. Hart left explicit instructions. You're not welcome here. This is insane. I have rights.
No, sir.
You have a restraining order. And if you don't leave right now, I'm calling the police. He left, but not before punching the elevator door, leaving a dent that he'd later have to pay for. The day of the court hearing arrived. I wore a simple navy dress and minimal makeup. I didn't need to perform or pretend. I just needed to tell the truth. Liam was already there when I arrived, sitting with his lawyer at the defendant's table. He looked terrible. His suit was wrinkled, his eyes were bloodshot, and he'd lost weight. When he saw me walk in, he stood up halfway, like he was going to come over. His lawyer grabbed his arm and pulled him back down. The hearing took 3 hours. Jonah presented every piece of evidence, methodically. Bank statements showing the unauthorized transfers. Credit applications with my forged signature. Text messages between Liam and Claire discussing his plans. Even a recording Hannah had made of Margaret discussing how they'd handle me once they got the money. Liam's lawyer tried everything. He claimed I was vindictive, that I'd misunderstood innocent actions, that the marriage had simply fallen apart naturally. But every argument crumbled under the weight of evidence. When it was my turn to speak, I stood up and faced the judge.
My voice was steady.
Your Honor, I'm not here because I'm angry or bitter. I'm here because what my husband did was wrong, and he needs to face consequences. He didn't just betray my trust. He committed fraud. He stole from me. He plotted to leave me with nothing. I'm asking this court to hold him accountable. Liam tried to lie, to cry, to manipulate. He told the judge that he loved me, that this was all a misunderstanding, that I was overreacting. But I stayed calm, collected, dignified. My witnesses, Jonah, Hannah, bank representatives, destroyed every lie he told with documented proof. The judge, a stern woman in her 60s, listened to everything. Then she made her ruling. Mr. Foster, I find your actions to be not only morally reprehensible, but also clearly illegal. The evidence of financial fraud and identity theft is overwhelming. She looked at him over her glasses. I'm ruling in favor of Mrs. Hart. You will pay her $400,000 in damages. You are barred from contacting her in any way. And I'm forwarding this case to the district attorney's office for potential criminal charges. Liam broke down in tears right there in the courtroom. Not tears of remorse, but tears of self-pity. He'd gambled everything on breaking me, and instead, he'd broken himself. I walked out of that courthouse feeling lighter than I had in years. Justice wasn't about destroying Liam. It was about reclaiming my dignity, my peace, and my power. People whispered as I passed through the courthouse lobby. Some looked at me with pity, others with admiration. I held my head high and kept walking. Their opinions didn't matter anymore. The only opinion that mattered was my own, and I was finally proud of who I'd become. Outside, Jonah was waiting. You did it, he said, smiling. We did it, I corrected. I couldn't have done this without you. Your father would be proud of you, Evelyn. So proud. Those words meant everything. More than the money, more than the legal victory, more than anything. My father had raised me to be strong, and I'd finally lived up to that. Back at Margaret's house, Liam returned to find debt collectors waiting on the porch. They'd been tracking him for weeks, and now that the court case was public, they knew exactly where to find him. Margaret opened the door, saw the men with their clipboards and legal documents, and immediately started ranting. This is all your fault, she screamed at Liam. You've ruined everything. My friends are asking me questions. The country club is talking about us. You've humiliated this family. For the first time, Liam screamed back. Years of being controlled by his mother, years of being molded into someone he wasn't, all came pouring out. You made me this way. You taught me that appearances mattered more than character. You told me to marry for money. You created this monster. They tore into each other like wolves, each blaming the other, neither taking responsibility for their own choices. It would have been satisfying to watch if it wasn't so pathetic. Meanwhile, Claire had moved on completely. She attended a charity event that week where she ran into me by chance. We were both surprised, standing there in our evening gowns, holding champagne glasses.
Evelyn, she said.
I wasn't sure if you'd want to talk to me. I don't have any anger toward you, I said honestly. You didn't know what he was planning. And honestly, the affair probably distracted him enough that he didn't notice what I was planning. She laughed, a genuine sound this time. I'm sorry for my part in all of this. For whatever it's worth, I think you're remarkable. The way you handled everything, the way you stood up for yourself. I wish I'd had that strength when I left my husband. It's never too late to find it, I said. We talked for a few more minutes before parting ways. There was no drama, no confrontation, just two women who'd both learned something valuable about self-worth and boundaries. I bought a small lakeside cottage similar to the cabin where I'd first found peace. It became my sanctuary, my place to heal and grow. The cottage had a wraparound porch, big windows that let in the morning light, and a small garden where I started growing vegetables and flowers. One evening, I took the note I'd written to Liam, the one that said, "You will never hurt me again," and I burned it in the fireplace. Watching it turn to ash felt symbolic. I wasn't carrying his cruelty with me anymore. I was letting it go completely. I started a wellness blog for plus-sized women focusing on emotional recovery, body positivity, and financial independence. I called it Rising After the Fall. The first post went viral within days. Women from all over the country reached out, sharing their own stories of leaving toxic relationships, of finding strength they didn't know they had, of rebuilding their lives from the ground up. I'd become more than just a survivor. I'd become an advocate, a voice for women who felt voiceless, a beacon of hope for those still trapped in the darkness I'd escaped. Jonah visited the cottage one quiet evening in early summer. We sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the lake in shades of gold and pink. He brought wine and fresh bread from the bakery in town. "I have something to tell you," he said, looking nervous for the first time since I'd known him. "What is it?" "I've cared about you for a long time, Evelyn. Even when your father was alive, I admired your kindness, your intelligence, your strength. But I never wanted to interfere, especially not while you were married."
He paused.
"I'm not asking for anything. I just wanted you to know that when you're ready, if you ever want to explore what might be possible between us, I'm here." I looked at him, really looked at him. Jonah had been there through everything. He'd protected my interests, supported my decisions, treated me with respect and dignity. He saw me for who I really was, not what I looked like or how much money I had. I didn't answer with words. I just smiled softly and squeezed his hand. It wasn't a rejection, but it wasn't a commitment either. It was an acknowledgement that maybe, someday, when I was fully healed, something beautiful could grow. But I wasn't ready yet. I was still learning to love myself, still discovering who I was outside of anyone else's expectations or desires. And that was okay. For the first time in my life, I was choosing myself first. We sat there in comfortable silence, watching the sun sink below the horizon. No pressure, no expectations, just two people enjoying each other's company with the possibility of something more hanging gently in the air. Later that night, I stood in my cottage doorway, looking out at the lake. The water was calm, reflecting the stars beginning to appear overhead. I thought about the woman I used to be, the one who woke up every morning trying to please a man who would never be pleased, who made herself smaller to fit into someone else's life. That woman was gone. In her place stood someone I was proud to be. Someone strong, independent, and unafraid. Someone who understood that happiness came from within, not from someone else's approval. I whispered the words that had become my mantra, the truth I'd finally learned. I didn't lose anything. I found myself. I walked into my cottage and closed the door behind me. Not closing myself off from the world, but closing the door on the past, on the pain, on the betrayal, on the years I'd spent believing I wasn't enough. For the first time in my entire adult life, I felt safe, loved, and whole. Not because someone else made me feel that way, but because I'd finally learned to give those things to myself. When someone who claims to love you reveals their true intentions, do Do you fight for the relationship or fight for yourself? If this story resonated with you, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about finding strength when it matters most.